This video is brought to you by viewers like you. Thank you. Be sure to subscribe and help get this video to 2,000 likes. And I say, hey! It's a brand new year, and DW's brand new obsession is with polls. No, the other kind.
Name something you always wanted to do.
That's not even a poll, that's an open-ended questionnaire, you plebe. DW pushes her petty polling onto Arthur and Francine, who for some reason aren't sitting with DW and her mom. Good call. Arthur says he wants to play a professional concert while skydiving, which, gravity and everything aside, would only last about 4 minutes. Also, how the hell would he get the whole audience in the air with him? But it's still not nearly as dumb as Francine's goal.
I'd like to orbit Saturn, so I could practice my drive to the net without friction or gravity.
Okay, Francine, two things. First off, the rings of Saturn aren't actually rings. They are a swirling collection of space rock, ice, and cosmic dust with no solid surface, so they would make a horrible hockey rink. Second, there is absolutely both gravity and friction around Saturn. That's what's keeping the rings in orbit. God, what second-rate university did these kids go to? Binky strolls in and uses DW's questionnaire as an excuse to steal their drinks, while Mrs. Reed doesn't do a goddamn thing.
You wipe that damn smirk off your face.
That afternoon, Arthur and Buster kill time by feeding their OCD with potato chips.
The first pile is big ones, then small ones, burnt ones, ones that look like a duck.
I like stack.
DW tries to interrupt their Ruffles ritual when Arthur tells her to piss off. He tells her she can have some chips if she can wait 5 damn minutes. DW says screw that and goes on a one-woman bitch parade.
Arthur won't share, and it's my house too because I live here and I have right.
You have the right to shut the hell up.
The boys stumble across a giant green potato chip, the holy grail of rainy day salty snacks. The two prepare a shrine for their deep-fried deity when DW snitches them out to her mom, giving her ample time to steal the tainted tuber. The boys quickly deduce DW's dastardly deed and decide to get their revenge by making DW think she poisoned herself. DW is now convinced she only has days to live. She decides not to tell her mom for fear of getting in trouble for stealing the chip in the first place, because this snot-nosed snack swiper would rather take an early grave than a 10-minute timeout. The next day, DW goes to the park to get advice from the Tibble tire marks, who confirm that green chips are poisonous. Boy, don't eat the damn sand. Binky overhears DW's dilemma and realizes he has even less time than she does.
I ate a green one 2 days ago.
Instead of talking to a single grown-up, the two resolve to treat every day as if it were their last. The two become fast friends as they bond over living life to the fullest, while simultaneously wasting a perfectly good kite.
It's amazing what you can do in one day if you try real hard.
Yeah, cute joke, but seriously, the episode takes place in May. What the hell is wrong with the weather in Elwood? DW decides to speedrun the calendar so she can enjoy all the holidays in one go. Though honestly, it's strange she thinks she's gonna die when clearly the Tibble's Pica is gonna take them out first. Meanwhile, Binky stands up to Mr. Ratburn, proving this 9-year-old has more balls than I ever will. Binky manages to weasel out of his punishment by giving his principal a midlife crisis.
I won't be a life fritter away or
That's not how you pronounce that.
Binky then decides to do the most daring thing a boy in the late 90s could do, take ballet. But all jokes aside, would this really be a big deal nowadays? I know this episode came out 25 years ago. What? But I don't think any boy would get bullied for taking ballet in 2024. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like dance classes have the same appeal now that karate had to kids in the 90s and early 2000s. Yeah, remember when every kid and their brother took karate classes? Where are they now? Arthur suspects something is up with DW, who's been acting suspiciously unbitchy for over a week. His suspicions grow when he overhears her and Binky reminisce over their recent acid trip.
Have you ever really looked at a leaf?
I did it yesterday for 5 hours.
DW is about to go to Binky's recital when she swipes a green chip out of her brother's mouth. Arthur reveals he lied about the chips being poison and realizes DW's sudden kindness was only brought on by her fear of death.
I told you should have told your mom right away. Oh, you did not.
Yes, she did.
You'd better tell your mom.
Instead of waiting till after Binky's recital, DW sneaks backstage to tell him the truth during the middle of his performance. Binky unsurprisingly develops instant stage fright, until his friends convince him to finish the performance. Binky thanks DW for giving him the courage to take ballet in the first place, even though she's also the one who made him think he had less than a week to live. It would seem all's well that ends well, but you'll never believe what happens next. Arthur and his friends are excited to see a live taping of a show where kids reveal their most humiliating experiences on camera, a show that would be largely irrelevant in the era of TikTok and Instagram. DW wants to tag along, but Arthur says she's too immature. He reminds her of when she ruined his trip to the movies, and the more recent example of when she freaked out after eating a green potato chip. Arthur's parents tell him not to tease DW, even though they were laughing at her just a few seconds ago. Arthur tells DW she can come if she can prove she's mature enough. DW accepts his Sisyphean challenge and checks out the biggest book in the library with the help of her squeaky-ass wagon. DW next tries to prove herself by ordering a mature dessert.
I'll have something vegetarian.
It's ice cream, it's already vegetarian. DW notices she's being treated differently by everyone in town, including the Tibbletremors. She realizes the whole town has found out about her green potato chip incident, much to her horror. She instantly assumes Arthur blabbed to everybody and sets out to get her proof. She spends the next few days spying on Arthur and Buster, only to realize she's a rather defective detective. Things go from bad to worse when Buster's mom publishes the story in the citywide newspaper. DW begs help from Arthur, even though she was cursing his name just moments ago. Arthur is so used to his sister's crap, he knows it's better to just play along and do whatever she wants. She drags him around town to steal everyone's newspaper before they have a chance to read the article, which sounds funny until you remember newspaper theft is a criminal offense. DW racks up dozens of misdemeanors, only to find the papers have been redelivered. DW is left to wallow in her own self-pity. Instead of thanking her brother for helping her with her crime spree, she goes back to blaming him for spreading the story in the first place.
It's just like the times you stole my Crazy Bus CD and my snowball.
Oh, you can just fuck all the way off. Surprise, surprise. It turns out Mrs. Reed is the one who leaked the story to the press. She plans to send the article to everyone she knows, because Jane Reed is a blabbermouth. Jane is somehow surprised her daughter is upset with her for making fun of when she thought she was going to die. She promises not to tell the story anymore, even though the damage has already been done, and DW is now the laughingstock of the whole town. DW apologizes to Arthur for being mean to him, proving the 4-year-old has surpassed her mother's maturity. Arthur takes pity on his sister and invites her to the show.
That worked out happily for everyone.
Shut your goddamn mouth. DW is waiting in line for the taping when she overhears her mom gossiping about the potato chip story, even though she literally just promised never to do that again. DW runs off in tears, with her maternal trust now permanently shattered. She runs into Binky, who tells her to just stare down anyone who's being mean to her, which only works if you're already big and scary. Mrs. Reed tracks down DW so she can apologize for ruining her life. She says she only brought up the story because people keep asking her about the article, which is a problem she should have thought of before she went talking to the press. Instead of making a public apology for humiliating her daughter, Mrs. Reed decides to just ignore the article until people stop talking about it. Mother of the Year, everybody. DW finally gets to see the show, where it turns out Binky turned his own brush with death into a whimsical ballet. And to this day, I'm still not sure if this potato chip costume was actually edible, or if Binky just took a huge-ass bite out of a foam suit. Let's review. DW stole a green potato chip from her brother, because she didn't have the patience to wait 5 minutes for him to share. When she thought she'd been poisoned, she decided to face death alone instead of telling the truth. She roped Binky into her end-of-life crisis, leading the two to speedrun their bucket lists. But even when DW learned the truth about green potato chips, she was unable to move on with her life after she became the talk of the town. She accused her brother of gossiping about her and roped him into committing several felonies to try to keep the story from spreading. DW only apologized to Arthur once she learned it was her mother who'd been spreading the story all along.
You done fucked up now!
Mrs. Reed turned her daughter's trauma into the joke of the day, opening her up to ridicule from everyone in Elwood City. When that blew up in her face, she decided to just ignore the problem until it went away. So, F you, Mrs. Reed, for betraying your daughter's trust and turning her into a public laughingstock. And of course, for stealing the green potato chip in the first place, F you, DW.
And I say, hey!
Arthur points out just how big a pain DW can be, like how she charges kids for tours of his room, which wouldn't be so bad if she cut him in on the profits. The Reed family is about to enjoy their spaghetti with cauliflower balls, gross, when we're introduced to Nadine, DW's new imaginary scapegoat whom she created to blame all her screw-ups on, like playing with her food or first-degree murder. DW yells at her father for stepping on Nadine's imaginary tail, nearly causing him to drop a stack of trays. The dishes are saved, but that doesn't stop DW from flinging her dinner on her brother's head.
Nadine, look what you did to Arthur.
And so it begins. DW apologizes on behalf of Nadine, while Mr. Reed does absolutely nothing to punish the tyrannical toddler. Nadine is convinced Arthur hates her, even though she's not the one who dumped dinner all over his head. DW assures her Arthur doesn't hate her, since it would be absurd to be mad at a child who doesn't even exist. Arthur and Buster get hyped for the Hurl-A-Whirl, a brand new thrill ride that allows riders to set their own speed, which is clearly a lawsuit waiting to happen. Mr. Reed agrees to take the family to the grand opening, including Nadine. Arthur is worried DW will embarrass him at the theme park if she's seen talking to her imaginary friend. Cause I guess if DW is acting like a baby, then somehow that makes Arthur a baby by proxy? I don't know, kid logic or some bullshit. Arthur comes up with a plan to keep DW from coming along, while Buster speedruns juvenile diabetes.
You like reading, right? Trade you my library card for half that piece of cake.
The two try to bully DW into staying home from the amusement park, which seems rather superfluous since DW isn't even tall enough to go on any of the rides. They try to make her seasick on the playground, which backfires horribly after Buster gets knocked on his ass. DW bests her brother at every turn, leaving Arthur with no backup plan.
I might not have been ready to go on the Twirly World tomorrow. How can you go on a ride if you can't even say the name right?
Hey, I've been to this place and I can't pronounce it for shit. Back off, Arthur. It's the day of the grand opening, and DW is camped out in the driveway. Arthur makes one last-ditch effort to ditch Nadine by tricking DW into thinking she's sick. Arthur, you sneaky bastard. DW decides to leave Nadine at home, and then immediately changes her mind after the Reeds drive all the way to the park. DW insists they drive all the way home to get her imaginary friend. Mr. Reed gives in to his daughter's delusions by pretending Nadine's stowed away in the back, cause I guess he's too scared to give his child a spanking in public. Arthur and Buster use up all their park tickets on the Hurl-A-Whirl, and while I could point out this ride seems way too dangerous for 8-year-olds, I'm more perplexed why a residential theme park is operating on a ticket-based system instead of just charging patrons a flat admission fee for the whole park. I'm just saying, it's not like Six Flags charges you by the ride. Arthur's worst fear comes true when he ends up crossing paths with both Francine and DW. DW gives Arthur some tickets she found, claiming they're from Nadine, because it would be too out of pocket if DW did something nice of her own volition. Arthur is taken aback by his sister's sporadic generosity and agrees to go on any ride she wants. Arthur instantly regrets his promise when DW takes him on the bumper cars for a vehicular ass-kicking. And even though Nadine pops up regularly throughout the rest of the show, we never see DW grow as a person, because the good part of her can only exist as a separate entity. Thus the 4-year-old is forever doomed to have the emotional maturity of a deflated balloon. Let's review. DW created an imaginary friend for the sole purpose of having someone to blame for all her shenanigans. She threatened to ruin Arthur's trip to the amusement park unless she could bring the imaginary Nadine along. When Arthur tried to leave Nadine behind, DW refused to go into the park until her father agreed to let her have her way. And even when DW did something nice for her brother, she used it to blackmail him into letting her beat him up on the bumper cars. F-U, DW.
And I say, hey!
Arthur and DW are watching a special on ancient Egypt, cause I guess the Reed parents can't afford cable. Arthur says he'd like to be a mummy so he can be buried with his action figures. DW tries to one-up her brother's fantasy by listing off her own greatest possessions.
I ate a snowball, but somehow it disappeared.
Even in her own imagination, DW is still a massive tightwad. DW raids Grandma Thora's wardrobe while ogling over Clarissa, a treasured porcelain doll Thora has had since childhood. Grandma Thora allows DW to take Clarissa home for the week. What could possibly go wrong?
I know you'll treat Clarissa like the treasure she is.
You clearly don't know your own granddaughter very well. Over the next few days, DW treats Clarissa like absolute crap. She deliberately allows the doll to get soiled in mud, sand, and God knows what else. DW takes the decrepit doll to see a puppet show at the library, where Rapunzel accidentally falls and breaks her neck.
This is much more exciting than the version Mom told me.
I think I speak for everyone when I say this girl needs Jesus. That afternoon, DW is jumping on her bed with all her toys when Clarissa gets launched into the air. Mr. Reed watches in horror as his mother's prized possession gets positively wrecked to shit. We get a rare scene of Mr. Reed scolding his daughter for being so careless with Clarissa. DW shows absolutely no remorse for her actions. Shocker. She suggests they just buy a replacement doll for Grandma Thora.
Clarissa's old.
And she won't mind that it broke. Oh, good.
Like I said, bitch needs Jesus. Mr. Reed decides to teach DW just how badly she's screwed up. He explains how Thora grew up with 3 older brothers, which is apparently DW's worst nightmare. Turns out Thora was raised in Elwood City, in a time when the only thing people had to worry about were noisy Zeppelins. Lucky for them, they wouldn't have to put up with the Zeppelins for much longer. Young Thora is sick of only getting to play with her brother's hand-me-downs. She goes to the toy store to look at the dolls in the window display.
Her mom let her go by herself?
Things were different then, DW.
Motherfucker, you let your kids go around town by themselves all the time, including this episode. On Thora's 5th birthday, her parents give her the Clarissa doll. Thora is so grateful to have a toy of her own and vows to take good care of it for the rest of her life. A promise that DW managed to wreck in less than a week. The Reed parents decide to take Clarissa to the local doll hospital, which ends up being closed. All the same, it's probably best they avoided this place since it's clearly a front for a money laundering scheme. I'm just saying, this specialty boutique can somehow afford a downtown location and is doing well enough that it can shut down shop for over a month. Even in the 90s, there's no way this place would stay in the black without some shady backroom shit. Surprise, surprise, Grandma Thora's coming by for dinner that night. DW is rightfully worried she'll get disowned.
Now Grandma Thora will find out what a bad granddaughter I am.
What do you mean, now? As usual, Arthur steps in to save the day. The two take Clarissa to Mr. Ratburn, who agrees to fix the doll and tells them to stop by his house in 2 hours. Lucky for the kids, their dad already knows the address. The Reeds pull up to the house when they hear a power saw in the garage. DW worries Mr. Ratburn is torturing her doll and breaks into his house. Turns out he was just making a new desk for grading papers, proving the rat's love language consists solely of papers, puppets, and pastries. Clarissa is good as new. Grandma Thora is none the wiser, but DW folds faster than wet toilet paper and spills the beans. Instead of scolding DW for her reckless behavior, Grandma Thora wrongfully congratulates her for fixing the mess she created, even though it was Arthur who actually took the initiative to find someone to fix Clarissa.
Your getting her repaired shows that not only are you trustworthy, you're very responsible.
Bullshit. In a severe lapse in judgment, Grandma Thora decides to let DW keep Clarissa forever. But we never see Clarissa again after this episode, because despite DW's promise, she probably destroyed the doll beyond repair the second her grandma left the house. Let's review. DW took her grandma's favorite childhood toy and absolutely destroyed it. She didn't show a shred of care or remorse as she nearly ruined the doll beyond repair. She only started to regret her actions once she learned the doll had been part of her grandma's life since she was 5. And even when DW managed to fix the doll and save her own ass, she couldn't resist the urge to snitch on herself to her grandma. But none of this would have happened if Grandma Thora had the foresight to keep her childhood keepsake out of her greedy granddaughter's grubby mitts. So, F you Grandma Thora for entrusting your most prized possession to your least reliable grandchild. And of course, for treating said doll like absolute garbage, F you DW.
And I say, hey!
The episode opens with DW hosting her own version of MTV Cribs, a parody that will totally land with PBS Kids' 6 to 11 demo. Even trashy reality shows aren't spared from the Muppet Babies treatment. DW is playing with her younger neighbor Visita and snaps the head off one of her dolls. Deja vu. The two go upstairs to find Visita's parents are putting in a bed for her. They tear down her crib and Visita is having none of it.
I won my crib! I got all dressed!
That's what you sound like.
DW assures Visita everything will be okay, as she herself has gone through this same experience. Flashbacks ensue. We see a short-haired DW happily chilling in her crib just a few months before Kate's birth, which is absolutely not what we saw in the episode Arthur's Baby. We're barely 2 minutes in, and already DW is giving a giant middle finger to the show's continuity. DW's mom tells her she'll be upgrading to a big kid bed so the baby can use the crib. DW bitches and moans all the way to the mattress store.
It's got monkeys.
I hate monkeys.
That actually tracks.
Why don't you go back to your own house and stop bothering us?
You bitch.
DW gripes that she only wants her crib, but then immediately changes her mind when she eyes the most expensive bed in the store. That afternoon, DW shows off her new bed to the till. What the actual fuck? DW lies it was her idea to get the bed in the first place. Her fetus-faced friends claim her crib was the only thing protecting her from Arachnar the spider monster. The two undercooked ulcers try to scare DW, but even she's too smart for their bullcrap.
He can't reach his tentacles through the bars of a crib, but kids in beds are easy picking.
If he's half man, half spider, why does he have tentacles?
Tentacles!
Exactly. Cram it, you overinflated walking testicles. That night, DW is too excited to fall asleep. She gets out of bed and goes through all her books, even though she can't read. Or did the show forget that, too? DW realizes she's no longer confined by the restraints of her crib and sneaks into her parents' bedroom. Mrs. Reed puts her daughter back to sleep as she starts to regret taking the bars off DW's bed. DW promises to stay in her room and then sneaks out again the second her mom falls asleep. She sneaks into Arthur's room and steals his toys.
Would you like some tea, Stanley?
Arthur somehow sleeps through DW's loud-ass tea party until she starts knocking shit on the floor, causing her brother to have a panic attack. Mr. Reed puts DW back to bed, but not before DW makes fun of Arthur for freaking out after she broke into his room. The next night, DW sneaks out of her room again and goes downstairs to watch TV. She tries to play her Mary Moo Cow tape and ends up breaking the VCR. She shuts off the TV, but not before stepping on her talking clown doll, which is very, oof. DW next goes to the kitchen to steal ice cream from the freezer. She struggles to open the container with her weak nerd arms when she gets spooked by the dog. DW runs back upstairs while Pal eats a whole container of chocolate ice cream, and somehow evades death by diarrhea. DW thinks Arachnar is after her and tries to get back into her crib. She gets tangled in her bedsheets and screams so loud she makes Arthur think she's getting kidnapped. Good. Let her be someone else's problem. Arthur rushes into DW's room, mistakes her for a burglar, and tackles her to the ground. Turns out the monster was just DW's troll doll, which looks like the world's hairiest choking hazard. DW finally goes to sleep, but only after making her heavily pregnant mother share her child-sized bed. DW's story does little to calm Visita's nerves. Visita asks DW to spend the night to help her break in the new bed.
Okay, you need to say these things in your head before you say them out loud.
That night, Visita is fast asleep when DW sneaks out of bed to raid the freezer. This is why DW can't have nice things. Or friends. Let's review. DW refused to give up her crib and made a huge fuss about it. When she got a big girl bed, she let herself get scared by the Tybalt Tripwire's stupid story. She snuck out of her room the first chance she got and used her newfound freedom to wreak havoc on the Reed home. She scared the crap out of her brother on multiple occasions and nearly destroyed her room in the process. And when her best friend went through the same ordeal, she agreed to stay the night, but only so she could pull the same bullshit at their house. F you, DW.
And I say, hey!
The episode opens with Mr. Ratburn giving a lecture about plowing, a topic he and Mr. Reed are all too familiar with. Arthur imagines what it'd be like if his friends were teachers. Turns out Buster would be the kind of teacher to terrorize his students with his indoor motorcycle, while the Brain would outsource his labor to the Brainwave box from Batman Forever, thus making his job as a teacher redundant. DW's preschool class is on a field trip to Lakewood Elementary. She tries to sit with Arthur until he tells her to piss off. DW proceeds to destroy her brother's reputation by telling everyone in earshot about his fear of underwear, and brandishes a pair of his boxers for all the world to see. Bitch showed up with a plan. Arthur wallows in shame as he watches his social life go down the shitter. The preschoolers are teamed up with the third graders to give a group presentation in front of the whole school. Arthur gets paired with the Tybalt Tricksters, who end up triggering his PTSD.
I like it when toys fall out of windows. Smash!
I told you
Not to touch it!
Binky is paired up with DW and quickly realizes they have nothing in common, aside from their shared near-death experience. DW reveals her entire personality is based around My Little Pony, a revelation so horrifying, Binky's left eyebrow runs away from his face. Binky begs Mr. Ratburn to let him switch partners. Mr. Ratburn tells him tough shit. DW tells Binky she wants to put on a play about a unicorn who gives pony rides to a literal pony. Binky says hell no, as he has a hard stance against horses riding other kinds of horses. DW threatens Binky with a failing grade if he doesn't comply with her demands. Binky tries to pull a reverse Uno, only for DW to point out that preschoolers don't get grades. So why the hell are they doing these projects in the first place? Binky says fuck it and decides to take the F. The two are about to throw fists until they get entranced by a commercial for Riverdance. The duo decides to put on their own dance for the showcase. There's just one problem. DW can't dance. Binky takes it upon himself to teach ballet to the big-mouthed booger eater. Unfortunately, DW is so clumsy, she can't even bend down and stand up again without falling on her ass.
Whoa! Ooh!
Oh, brother.
Binky gets a swollen head. a more swollen head, as he insists DW call him Mr. Barnes, as in Mr. Barnes is a douchebag. He tries to cram 2 years of ballet lessons into 2 hours. DW tries to keep up and ends up destroying a lamp, prompting Binky to get the fuck out of Dodge. The next day, Binky goes over tap dancing, only to find out DW shoved sharp-ass thumbtacks into the bottom of her shoes. What the fuck?
Fiddle-dee-dee. That will require a tetanus shot.
Turns out DW didn't review any of the moves Binky showed her.
Didn't you learn anything from those index cards?
Of course not! I can't read!
Okay, first off, DW, this is like the 5th time the show has gone back and forth on whether you can read or not. Either learn how to read or shut the fuck up. Second, even if you can't read, you couldn't get your parents to read them to you. Nobody has time for your lazy-ass excuses. DW gives up hope on ever learning how to dance. Binky tries to comfort her, but even he can't deny how much she sucks ass. Things go from bad to worse when Binky gets called out by his fellow tough customers for doing ballet, even though they've already seen him do ballet before and were very supportive. And don't try to claim this episode takes place before the green chip incident, because that was Binky's whole incentive for learning ballet in the first place. Man, Season 8 as a whole really said fuck it to the show's continuity. Binky lies to his friends and says he was teaching DW a new form of kung fu. His fib backfires when the two insist Binky teaches them. The lesson goes horribly. Rattles and Molly chew Binky out for not taking the time or care to properly teach them the moves. This leads Binky to an epiphany.
I thought DW was just a bad student. I was being a lousy teacher.
Two things can be true at the same time. Over the next few days, Binky revises his teaching methods and manages to turn DW and his friends into semi-decent dancers. It's the day before the presentation and everything is set until Binky falls and twists his ankle.
Did you guys hear my ribs crack?
Ironically, DW is horrified at the idea of having the whole stage to herself, so Binky tricks his friends into filling in for him. The next day, we see the Tibble Tycoons use their presentation as an excuse to beat the shit out of Arthur and Buster. DW is up next, and we finally get to see the dance the episode has spent 10 minutes building up to, which lasts 5 goddamn seconds. Seriously, even the Tibble Trash's presentation gets more screen time. After the show, Binky gifts DW his first pair of ballet slippers, which are way too big and probably smell like ass. We then get the most out-of-pocket fourth wall break in the show.
You gotta listen to your heart. Listen to the beat. Listen to the rhythm of the street.
He said it! He said it!
The episode ends with DW trying on the slippers and presumably breaking her neck.
Whoa!
Let's review. DW used her class field trip as an excuse to humiliate her brother in front of his peers. She showed off his underwear to the entire school, ensuring a never-ending barrage of swirlies and ball-busting for Arthur's foreseeable future. She refused to compromise with Binky on their group project and tried to strong-arm him into being her unicorn cuck. When the two finally bonded over their mutual love of dance, DW struggled to learn the most basic moves and destroyed her own lamp in the process. But in all fairness, DW wasn't the only asshole in this episode, lest we forget Binky Barnes, who used his knowledge of ballet as a means to stroke his own ego. He badgered DW for not doing everything right on the first try and only changed his ways when his friends pointed out he was being a total dick. And even when the two finally learned their dance, Binky ended up twisting his ankle like a dumbass, leaving DW to hog all the glory for herself. So, F you Binky for being a bad teacher. And of course, for making Binky's life harder than it needs to be, F you DW.
And I say, hey!
The episode opens with Arthur telling Buster how he walked in on his dad making pound cake with Mr. Ratburn. Buster agrees not to tell anyone, but DW refuses to let sleeping rats lie. She tries to badger her brother into spilling the tea. Arthur tells her to bugger off. Turns out everyone DW knows is keeping secrets from her, because they all know she's a blabbermouth. DW is so desperate for a secret, she tries to get the audience to spill their guts. Dear God, she can see us. DW is struck with a fatal case of FOMO. Nadine convinces her to make up her own secret so she won't feel left out. The next morning, DW brags to Arthur and Buster that she knows something they don't. The boys don't seem to give a damn, as they're clearly preoccupied with their racist breakfast cereal. DW is driven mad by her brother's indifference and admits she made the whole thing up. And while I could point out how cringy this moment is, I'm more confused why Buster is eating breakfast at the Reed house on a school day. Do you not have cereal at your own damn house? Nadine scolds DW for blabbing her imaginary secret the first chance she got. DW next tries to goad the toxic Tibbles by claiming she heard a secret from their grandma. The bastard brothers call her bluff by calling their grandma on their cell phone. DW crumbles faster than her brother's model plane, only to find out there was no phone. Cause what stupid-ass parent would give a cell phone to a 4-year-old? DW scrapes her elbow and goes crying to the nurse like a weenie. She runs into James, who asks her what happened. DW claims it's a secret, even though everyone on the playground saw what happened. DW is shocked to learn that James split his pants, which would be embarrassing if he wasn't like the third kid on the show to rip his pants. James begs DW not to tell his secret, which is like begging London Bridge not to fall down. DW almost instantly defaults on her promise and goes to blab to Emily, who rightfully claims she's full of crap. DW nearly spills the beans right then and there until she gets caught by James. That night, DW has a nightmare where she tells her secret to Emily, who goes on to share it with their whole class and ruins James's life. Even in her own dreams, DW is still a god-awful garbage child. The next day, DW tells her mom how hard it is to keep her secret. Because if there's one thing Mrs. Reed knows, it's how to keep a secret.
You can tell it to me.
Bullshit. DW admits she can't resist the call to snitch, so Mrs. Reed suggests she distract herself by thinking about Christmas. Cause obviously DW only has happy memories of Christmas.
I wanted Tina the Talking Tabby!
I already made a 15-minute video about that. Also, thank you all for making that video the third most watched on my channel. I don't have a joke for this part, just seriously, thank you. Instead of explaining to Emily that it's not her place to share someone else's secret, DW spends the whole day gaslighting her best friend. That night, DW has another nightmare where she gets kicked out of a Mouths Wide Shut party after blabbing her secret. DW tries to stay home from preschool by telling her mom she needs a mental health day, which would be totally valid if she had any mental capacity left in her intellectually devoid skull. Mrs. Reed gives in to her daughter's bullcrap and begs Grandma Thora to look after her, while Arthur's sorry ass still has to go out into the real world like the rest of us. Turns out DW inherited her blabbermouth from both her mother and her grandmother, who tells her the only way to keep a secret safe is to violently scream it into a seashell and then throw it in the lake, which is all fine and dandy until the birds and fish start talking shit behind your back. The next day at preschool, Emily begs DW to tell her the secret. DW says her secret is that her grandma taught her how to keep a secret, which in and of itself isn't even a secret anymore, since DW just told it to Emily. Let's review. DW was desperate for someone to share their secrets with her, even though she knew damn well she couldn't keep her mouth shut for more than 5 seconds. She tried to make up her own secret and ended up snitching on herself. Twice. When she finally learned another kid's secret, she couldn't even go one afternoon without almost blabbing it to her best friend. DW made herself sick as she struggled to suppress her need to misdeed. Grandma Thora was able to make DW feel better by convincing her to hurl her secrets and opinions into a bottomless void. God help us if she ever discovers Twitter. And while DW might be a perpetual gossip machine, at least we know it runs in the family. F you, DW.
And I say, hey!
The Reed family is enjoying Arthur's favorite dessert. Arthur susses out his parents' baked goods bribery, as they reveal it's DW's turn to pick the next family vacation. Arthur assumes DW will choose Ponyland, which he believes looks like a mix of Disneyland and Midsommar.
My brain is melting!
DW is drunk with power. She purposefully draws out her decision so long it extends past the opening titles. Surprise, surprise, DW reveals she wants to go camping. The Reed parents pat themselves on the back for DW's smart decision, and we get the weirdest in-show plug for PBS.
It proves that our limiting her TV time to educational channels has helped her learn to think for herself and not just parrot what the TV says.
Not sure if that's worth bragging about. I grew up watching PBS, and now I make a living telling cartoon toddlers to eat shit. Just saying, don't count your chickens.
I've got to buy her more books.
Make sure to include this one. The family packs their bags as Arthur laments he'll have to spend the whole weekend trapped in a tent with DW.
You make it sound like DW's difficult.
Mr. Reed, where have you been for the last 4 years? DW honks at her dad to get the let out and then spends the whole car ride singing and screaming at the top of her lungs. The family gets to the state park and the first thing DW points out is how there's no wildlife animals like the ones on TV. The rest of the Reed family sets up the campsite while DW dedicates her time to bitching and moaning about the lack of majestic whimsy.
When am I gonna see something wild? Nothing's happening.
You live in Pennsylvania. The wildest thing you're likely to see is a fox fighting a raccoon over a half-eaten cheesesteak. Meanwhile, Arthur and his dad quickly realize how boring it is to fish when you can't drink. Mr. Reed is half asleep when he finally catches a fish. The two return to camp to find DW in a bad mood. What else is new? Mr. Reed is about to make dinner when DW starts crying that the fish is dead. DW is so upset, she forces her parents to bury the fish and hold an honest-to-God funeral for their dinner.
What if I never meet any wild animals that Arthur and Daddy haven't already killed?
Okay, that one was actually pretty good. The next morning, the Reed family is fast asleep in their tent, which is clearly bigger on the inside, when DW gets awoken by a stray deer. DW screams in the deer's face and is somehow surprised when it runs off. Mrs. Reed tells her deer are easily spooked, so DW spends the whole day sitting still and not making any movements. If only it were that simple all the time. DW is upset she pissed the day away and mentally retreats to the comfort of her own imagination. She pictures what it'd be like to make friends with a deer and live in the forest.
Butterfly in the sky, I can go twice as high.
She does know deer can't fly, right? The next morning, DW spots Walter the white-tailed deer. She tries to feed him cereal until her dad tells her to cut the crap. He reminds his daughter they aren't allowed to touch or feed the wildlife, which DW argues isn't any better than just watching TV at home.
You wouldn't like it if someone fed you strange food in your home.
I would if it was a deer.
That's not concerning. DW imagines what it'd be like to take Walter home and have her be her new brother. She begs her parents to let her bring the deer home and then cries when they tell her she can't have any friends who are wild animals. And apparently, she can't have any friends who are tamed animals either.
You okay, honey?
No!
Damn it, DW is 2 for 2 in this episode. Mrs. Reed tells her daughter that Walter wouldn't be happy living with DW because he'd be living with DW.
Would you like it if someone came and took you away from your family?
Just Arthur or everybody?
You suck!
DW then imagines how much Walter would miss his family in the woods, which is unironically one of the most heartbreaking moments of the show. Seriously, I remember crying when this scene used to play on TV. How'd the writers manage to give more emotional depth to a deer than a child? DW reluctantly agrees to leave Walter be, but refuses to stop being sad about it. The Reeds pack up the van as DW finally gets to meet her dear friend face to face. Oh, that's why the episode is called that. The Reeds drive off as Walter admits he wishes he could keep DW as his own pet. His father, Jesse, reminds him the forest is no place for a wild DW, plus she'd probably burn it down after a week. Let's review. DW begged her family to go on a camping trip, not because she likes nature, but because she wanted to copy something she saw on TV. She spent the whole trip crying over dead fish and complaining how real life isn't as exciting as television. When she saw a wild deer, she instantly formed a parasocial friendship with it and spent the rest of the trip trying to track it down. She threw a huge fit when her parents wouldn't let her take the deer home, and only calmed down when she realized how cruel it would be to tear someone away from their home and family. Unfortunately, this wouldn't be the first or worst time the Reed family went camping, as DW was determined to destroy every single one of her family's vacations. F you, DW.
And I say, hey!
DW interrupts her brother's rainy day snack to tell him about the parade outside. Arthur chooses now to start believing his serpent-tongued sister and goes to see for himself. Turns out it was all a lie. Because duh, and Arthur returns to find his brownie missing a huge bite, which somehow feels worse than if DW had just eaten the whole thing. Arthur says he wishes he was an only child, for obvious reasons, and while I understand Arthur's sentiment, I'm not sure why he has to lump in baby Kate. We all know she's the good sister. Arthur changes his mind when he remembers he can blame all his screw-ups on DW, even though we've proven time and again that never works. Elwood City is hosting its annual 4th of July picnic. Arthur and DW are in the middle of a race when DW's clumsy clumsy ass turns them from a wheelbarrow to a barrel roll.
Last time you almost drove me into the lake.
Which I'm sure was totally an accident. Sue Ellen offers to play with DW, only to be told the race is just for siblings. All the same, the race seems rigged considering both Fern and James bribed these two randos to pretend to be their siblings. DW tries to comfort Sue Ellen in the most DW way possible.
Maybe there's a contest for lonely children after this.
It's only children, DW. A lonely child is what you're gonna be when I sell you.
Burn!
Sue Ellen is bummed she doesn't have any siblings to play with. Even the Tibble troublemakers are giving her FOMO. Sue Ellen tells her parents she wants a brother or sister for her birthday, which is conveniently 9 months away. Her parents tell her that having another child wouldn't afford them the ability to travel all over the world. Sue Ellen says she'd happily give up her family's biannual international vacations in favor of having a snot-nosed sibling of her own. Clearly, Sue Ellen's head is cracked harder than Clarissa's. Sue Ellen decides to find her own sibling, since she can't legally inseminate her parents.
I don't think you can buy them.
Not unless you go by DW's dream logic. Sue Ellen thinks Binky could be a good older brother and goes to him for career advice on oceanography. Because if there's anyone who can offer sound advice, it's a 10-year-old flunky with a fist for a brain.
Why don't you study something cool like worms?
There's no such thing as a wormographer.
Sue Ellen, I got some bad news for you. Sue Ellen next goes to the brain, who commits the ultimate sin of making oceanography sound lame as shit. Also, that's not how you draw the eyes of Buddha. Way to go, PBS. Sue Ellen next tries to make Arthur her brother, which is extra icky when you remember she has a crush on him.
Are you sure nobody read my diary? I said some pretty nice things about you.
The show is rated G, right? Sue Ellen lastly goes to Prunella and her older sister, until she realizes they're the kind of assholes who method act as their D&D characters. Instead of calling it quits, Sue Ellen convinces herself the only solution is to get herself a younger sister. The next day, Sue Ellen arrives at the Reed home with a shovel to dig her own grave. Sue Ellen insists on babysitting DW, despite Arthur's fervent objections.
Don't you know what DW stands for?
I can answer that.
Give me 25 seconds on the clock, please. Dimwit, deadweight, dreamwrecker, dipshit waffle, devil worshipper, demon wench, destroyer of worlds, dopey wombat, doom wisher, dishwasher, donkey wiener, dickweed, danger weasel, dead weevil, deadly wizard, dart weapon, don't want, darkwing, dankweed, dribble wimp, dork whisperer, D's wingnuts, deranged watermelon, dangerous woman, dirtwad, diarrhea Weinstein, dog wipe, diaper wedgie, deathworm, douchewand, deer wrangler, defective wumbo, disaster warning, and Doro whiner Fred. Arthur watches hopelessly as Sue Ellen marches upstairs to her own funeral.
Glory, glory, he ain't gonna jump no more. And now, back to Arthur.
Sue Ellen enters the belly of the beast as she deludes herself into thinking DW will be willing to behave herself for an entire afternoon. Hell, she could barely last 10 minutes. Sue Ellen is past the point of no return as DW seals off her escape. DW takes one look at her next meal before screaming piggyback at the top of her lungs.
Piggyback!
Piggyback!
I know what sound I'll be hearing in my nightmares tonight. DW forces Sue Ellen to carry her around the house like a jackass. Arthur offers no respite for Sue Ellen's plight as he's become desensitized to his sister's innate cruelty. And even though Arthur claims his parents are home, we never see them once during the whole damn episode. God only knows what they're actually up to. Sue Ellen tries to teach DW how to play Simon Says. Guess how that turns out.
Simon says, hands on your hips.
You said your name was Sue Ellen.
Simon Says, scream and whine like a good-for-nothing brat.
Daddy, there's a stranger in the house!
Simon Says, give me the most unsettling laugh you can muster. Bitch is 4 years old acting like she never played Simon Says. Girl, you go to preschool. Simon Says takes up half your damn day. Sue Ellen then tries to host a tea party, which instantly falls apart when DW finds out there's no orange soda. I mean, to be fair, that'd be my deal breaker too. DW threatens to start crying if she doesn't get her soda, so Sue Ellen tries to calm the terrible toddler with an origami swan. Now that DW has the swan, what do you think she'll do with it? The Reed parents need to bolt down that fucking window. Sue Ellen is pushed past her breaking point after DW shoots her in the face with Homer's makeup gun. She flees the house and runs to the safety of her room. Sue Ellen admits she's now happy to be an only child, when, surprise, surprise, her parents tell her she's getting a new brother.
Strike that. Reverse it.
Turns out her parents are sponsoring a kid from Tibet who Sue Ellen could be pen pals with. Arthur says this is better than having a little brother.
Because he's 3,000 miles away.
Actually, Arthur, Tibet is over 7,500 miles away from the US. You're 0 for 2, PBS. And while Sue Ellen may have been traumatized by DW, it's nowhere near as bad as what Arthur will do to her in the future. Yeah, no matter how bad DW may be, So Funny I Forgot to Laugh is undoubtedly the worst episode of Arthur. Seriously, fuck that episode. Let's review. Sue Ellen was desperate to have a brother or sister of her own and tried to guilt her parents into getting pregnant. She then tried to trick her friends into filling the sibling role for her, which failed miserably. Sue Ellen then tried to make DW her little sister and quickly learned the grass is never greener. DW made it her mission to drive Sue Ellen batshit insane, a mission she passed with flying colors. DW spent the whole afternoon breaking Sue Ellen's back, screaming in her face, and treating her handmade gifts like crap. DW's torture only ceased once Sue Ellen ran home screaming. And in the end, Sue Ellen realized she was content with just having friends. Because when you think about it, what is a sibling other than a friend you can't ditch, no matter how toxic they become? So, F you Sue Ellen for not appreciating what you have. And of course, for terrorizing a poor girl just for the hell of it, F you, DW.
And I say,
Hey, I have a Patreon. Sign up at patreon.com/mattneff to get your name in the thank you credits, along with early access to every FUDW and the chance to vote for future episodes. If there's a movie or show you'd like me to talk about, top-tier patrons can commission a review for my channel. Check out the link in the description to become an FUDW superfan. Also, I'm now on Cameo, so make sure to check out my profile to get a personalized FU video.
and I say, hey, what a wonderful kind of day. If you could learn to work and play and get along with each other.